Welcome back, my students. Dr. Uwe here, and we are studying cardiovascular physiology from Guyton, and we completed organization of cardiovascular system. Now we are going to start with the properties of the cardiac muscle. If you look at this chapter, properties of cardiac muscle, it has 3 learning objectives. In this video, we are going to start with the learning objective number first. Before starting the lecture, important notice: no need to write anything. Notes of this lecture and the description of the video clearly. This question is the physiological characteristics of cardiac muscle. It's a very big question. We will study it in 2 parts. This is the part first. In this part, we will study first 5 physiological characteristics. In the next video, we will study the next 5 physiological characteristics of a cardiac muscle. So let's begin. The first physiological characteristics of cardiac muscle is excitable. What do you mean by excitable? Cardiac muscle have ability to respond to a stimulus. Whenever you give a stimulus to a cardiac muscle, it gives response to that stimulus, which implies cardiac muscle is excitable. The response to the stimulus is the change in the membrane potential. Whenever we use stimulus to a cardiac muscle, its response is the change in its membrane potential. And if the stimulus is of sufficient intensity, contraction of the cardiac muscle is obtained. So whenever we use stimulus, there is a change in the membrane potential of a cardiac muscle. And if we use the stimulus strong enough, the change in the membrane potential is so that the cardiac muscle contracts. Clearly. Now, the factors that affect the excitability of the heart are called as the bathmotropic factors. So the bathmotropic factors affect the excitability. Bathmotropic factors are those factors which affect the excitability of the heart. We have the positively bathmotropic factors which increase the excitability, and negatively bathmotropic factors that reduce the excitability. Clear so far? Now, how we will remember the bathmotropic factors are related to the excitability of the heart. How we will remember this? We will remember it by a little story. Our plans. We know our friends always make plans for Goa. Clearly, what do we do in Goa? We bath in the ocean, and whenever we hear about our Goa plans, we get excited. So bath, excitement. So by this story, we will remember bathmotropic factors are related to the excitability of the heart. Although we never go to the Goa because of our final minute cancellations. Now we have the second physiological characteristics of the cardiac muscle, that's autorhythmicity. Autorhythmicity means heart generate its own rhythm. Heart has the capability of generating its own rhythm. That means heart is self-excitatory. Clear? Now the third physiological property is cardiac muscle is contractile. Like a skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle contracts. What do you mean by contraction? Contracts, it's self-explanatory. And inotropy refers to the force of muscle contraction. Inotropy refers to the force of muscle contraction. Clearly? So we have here factors that increase the force of contraction are called as the positively inotropic, and those factors that reduce the force of contraction are called a negatively inotropic. So third physiological characteristic is cardiac muscle is contractile, it contracts, and inotropy refers to the force of muscle contraction. So we have the positively inotropic factors and negatively inotropic factors. These are the 3 properties of a physiological characteristics of a cardiac muscle. Moving on to the fourth physiological characteristic of a cardiac muscle, that is cardiac muscle conducts electrical impulses. Cardiac muscle conducts electrical impulses. It is self-explanatory. Cardiac muscle conducts electrical impulses. The presence of the intercalated discus helps in the conduction of electrical impulses. Clearly, this is the point number 2, that intercalated discus help in the conduction of electrical impulses. What are these intercalated discus? We will see in a minute. However, the speed with which the impulses are conducted in a cardiac muscle is relatively slow. So 3 points: cardiac muscle conducts electrical impulses, intercalated discus helps in doing so, but the speed of that impulses are very slow in cardiac muscles. Now we have, what are these intercalated discus? Cardiac muscle, it is made up of cells. Those cells are called cardiomyocyte. You can see in this diagram, this right here is a cardiomyocyte. This is another cardiomyocyte. Clearly? So these cells are connected to each other at intercalated discus. So one cardiomyocyte is connected to another cardiomyocyte at intercalated discus. So this is one cardiomyocyte, this is another cardiomyocyte. This is connected to this here. If we connect them, this to here. So when we connect them here and here, these are the intercalated discs. These are the intercalated discs. So one cardiomyocyte, that's a cardiac muscle cell, is connected to the another cardiomyocyte at intercalated discs. And these intercalated discs help in the conduction of electrical impulses. So electric impulse goes from one cell, one cardiomyocyte, to another cardiomyocytes because of the presence of these intercalated discs. Is it that clear? Now these cardiomyocytes, these are arranged in series and parallel to each other, forming a network. So these cardiomyocytes, they join to each other. There is another cardiomyocyte in series and parallel. As a result, they form a network. I will show you the diagram of a cardiac muscle from Guyton clearly. So this is the diagram from Guyton. As you can see, cardiac muscles arranged in series and parallel, forming a network, form a lattice work clearly. And these are the intercalated discs. As you can see, the intercalated discs clearly. Moving forward, this is the property number 4th, that is cardiac muscle conducts electrical impulses. Now we have the property number 5th and the property number last, that is cardiac muscle is syncytium. What do you mean by syncytium? All the cardiac muscle cells are so connected that they behave as a single unit. That is, when one cell becomes excited, the action potential spreads to all of them. Cardiac muscle is a syncytium. It means cardiac muscles are so connected that they behave as a single unit. When one cell becomes excited, that action potential spreads to all of them. Clearly? Is that clear? So cardiac muscle is a syncytium. Why do cardiac muscles behave as a syncytium? The reason is the strong connection between all the myocytes at intercalated discs. In the previous characteristic, we saw that the cardiac myocytes are joined at intercalated discs. Here at intercalated discs. And because of these presence of intercalated discs, clearly cardiac muscle behaves as a syncytium. Cardiac muscle is a syncytium because of these intercalated discs. So we can say that cardiac muscle is a syncytium of many heart muscle cells. Now, moving forward, heart is composed of actually two syncytiums. We have the atrial syncytium and we have the ventricular syncytium. Clearly, as we can see, that this is a rough diagram of a heart. We have the atrial syncytium, this part right here. Then we have the ventricular syncytium, this part right here. Atrial syncytium constitutes the walls of the two atria. This is the left atria, this is the right atria. So the walls of the atria, they constitute the atrial syncytium. Similarly, walls of the left and the right ventricles, they constitute the ventricular syncytium. Clearly, between the atrial syncytium and the ventricular syncytium, we have a fibrous tissue, that is atrioventricular ring. We have a fibrous tissue. This is in green color. Clearly, what is the function of this green color? What is the function of this fibrous tissue? It does not allow the atrial impulses to go into the ventricular impulses. So whenever atrium contracts, it does not allow that contraction to go into the ventricles. Clearly? Is that clear? Simple. In this fibrous tissue, in this atrioventricular bundle, in this atrioventricular ring, there is presence of AV bundle. That AV bundle conducts the electrical impulses from atria to ventricles. The fibrous tissue does not conduct the electrical impulses, but the AV bundle conducts the electrical impulses from atria to ventricles. Clearly, what is the importance of this AV bundle? It allows the contraction of the atria first. Blood is in the atrium. Clearly, when the atria contracts, clearly, all the blood goes to the ventricles. Clearly, so when all blood goes into the ventricles, then atria relaxes and ventricles contract. Clearly, so atria need to contract first than ventricles. Why atria need to contract first? Because all the blood in the atria need to go into their respective ventricles. Then the ventricles contract. This function is facilitated by AV bundle. That is what I'm talking about. AV bundle allows the contraction of the atria first. Atria contracts first, then the ventricles contract. They don't contract at the same time. It is facilitated by this atrioventricular ring, that is the fibrous tissue, and the AV bundle. Clearly, so atria and ventricle syncytium are separated by fibrous tissue called atrioventricular ring. So this atrioventricular ring. Moving forward, normally potentials are not conducted from atria syncytium into the ventricular syncytium. Normally potentials do not conduct from atria to ventricles directly through the fibrous tissue. So through this fibrous tissue, impulses are not conducted. Instead, they are conducted only by by a special connective tissue called the AV bundle. The division of the muscle of the heart into the two functional syncytiums allows the atria to contract a short time ahead of the ventricular contraction. This allows the blood in the atria to empty into the ventricles before the ventricles begin contracting. That's what I was teaching you, that atrias contract first, so that all the blood in the atrias come into the ventricles, then the ventricles contract. They don't contract at the same time. Because of the presence of the AV bundle, because of the presence of the fibrous tissue, that's atrioventricular ring. Clearly, so atrias contract first, and then all the blood of the atria comes into the ventricles, then the atria relax and the ventricles contract. They don't contract at the same time because of the presence of this atrioventricular ring and the AV bundle present in this fibrous tissue. Clearly, these are the five physiological characteristics of cardiac muscle. Now, before we conclude this chapter, this video, there is one important